Hey everybody, I'm Waller's Wallet, and in this video, I'm going to break down how I booked 2 adult tickets and 1 lap infantile to San Francisco for only 30 bucks. But first, if you're new to this channel is all about credit cards, credit card rewards, and showing you how you can use your points and miles to travel for less. So if something that interests you, consider subscribing and turn the bell notification on as well. Also, consider giving the video a thumbs up. It really does help the channel out. Now, my wife happened to have a 5-day weekend without using any vacation time, so we're deciding to head to the West Coast for a little getaway and to see some family. Now, I looked from Bangor, and that's where I live, and the flight times and mile costs weren't great. Now, I don't mind layovers, but I prefer not to have more layovers and flight time to hit the West Coast than it would for me to fly over to Europe. And I actually had a couple of options deciding where I wanted to leave from. I could fly from Bangor and just kind of suck it up and deal with it. I could fly from Manchester, New Hampshire, where we have friends and family we can stay with, or we could even fly from Boston. Now, if I were to reposition to Manchester or Boston, it would take about 3.5 hours of driving time, but really, it would depend on the mile savings and the flight time difference. And after looking at my options, I decided repositioning was exactly what we needed. And I ended up booking our outbound flight from Boston and our flight home back into Manchester, New Hampshire, and the flight times here just made the most sense for us. Now let's talk about how I booked my outbound flight. Like I always tell you, you want to check the cash fares of these tickets before even looking at transfer point options. Now flying from Boston, I did want to fly non-stop. This gives me more time on the ground in San Francisco, and really it's also easier traveling with a baby. And the cash fare for 2 adults and a lap infant was just $257, which really wasn't too bad. Then I was stuck between, do I fly JetBlue or do I fly Delta? And I know JetBlue would have given me the better experience over Delta, but I've had good luck with Delta recently, and the departure time on the Delta flight just worked out better for us, so I ended up booking us on Delta. To look at transfer options, I actually started at Virgin Atlantic because American Express is offering a 30% transfer bonus to Virgin Atlantic, which is great. Now, when I looked over at Virgin Atlantic, it would have cost 26,000 points and about $17 in taxes and fees. And after you take into consideration the American Express transfer bonus, this would have only cost 20,000 points. But then I checked Delta, and it was actually better than using Virgin Atlantic miles because it was only 8,500 Delta miles one way per person. So this would have been a total of 17,000 Delta miles. Now I only needed to transfer 16,000 points over because I did have a little less than 2,000 points in my account. But because American Express charges a ridiculously bogus, stupid excise tax for domestic carriers, this cost me about 10 bucks to transfer those 16,000 points. And I currently have just a little over 20 bucks left on my Hill and the Spire airline credit. And starting in January, American Express is going to be offering travel protections, but only on round-trip tickets. So I actually use my altitude reserve to pay for my taxes and fees, since the winters here in New England can be quite rough, and I do value the travel protections for this flight. Now, I actually could have booked this in basic economy for 6,000 points, but for a 7-hour flight, I think it's important that my wife and I sit together to manage our little guy. But if I was flying solo, I would have gladly done basic economy without any hesitation. Now let's talk about how I booked my flight home. Now flying home, remember, we're flying back into Manchester, New Hampshire. And looking at the flight options to fly home, most of them were just terrible for flight times. Some of them had 2 or 3 layovers. It just was not ideal. Now, while I always say to check the cash fares, something to keep in mind, Google Flights does not show Southwest. Now, Southwest was showing flights from San Francisco back over to Manchester, New Hampshire for just under 6,100 points per person. And I will be back in Manchester, New Hampshire about 5:30 p.m., which worked out great for us. And this was not only the most convenient option, but it was also our cheapest option. And I actually do like Southwest Airlines. I know some people out there don't like them because of the boarding process, but hey, I have a kid now, so that's like an airline boarding cheat code. So I actually ended up moving over 13,000 Ultimate Reward points, since you do need to move them in 1,000-point increments. Then I ended up paying my taxes and fees with my altitude reserve, so I made sure to receive my travel protections on the flight home. Now let's talk about the total cost. This is where that double-edged sort of dynamic pricing I talk about really worked out in my favor this time. It just so happened that Delta and Southwest worked out great. But this definitely could have been a terrible option because dynamic pricing could be terrible options as well. but the total cost for these flights were just about 30,000 points, and $32 have to account for that excise tax, American Express, which I ended up feeling was pretty awesome. And the cash cost of these tickets would have been about $480, but I paid roughly just 7% of the actual cost for these flights, and I am super happy with that. Now, I could have used cash back I've earned and just paid the $480, but I prefer to use that money at my destinations as opposed to my flights. And from a cent per point value, I received just about 1.5 cents per point, which is actually pretty good for economy flights. But I've told you before, there is more to value than a cent per point value. And more importantly, I got the flights that I wanted, which included a non-stop flight on the way out to San Francisco. Now, I could have used my altitude reserve points, and I thought about doing that, but I'm actually planning on using those for a future redemption later in the year, and I'm perfectly happy paying just $32 for 2 adults and a lap infant round trip to San Francisco. So tell me, how would you have booked this ticket? Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in this video. If you want to help support the channel, a simple way would be use links on the website or in the description below. And until next time, safe travels and take care.